Alright, hello everybody, this is Antonio Wolf. We are continuing Franz Kafka's The Trial. We are on chapter 6, which is a little bit, which is about, we're about 2/3 of the way through the book by this point. It's not that long. Anyways, for those of you who, for whatever reason, have started here and haven't listened to the rest of the, let's call it episodes, here's a little tidbit to draw you in, to hopefully get you to be interested in listening to the rest of it. Joseph K. is guilty. If you've heard anything about this book, you've probably never heard that. If you want to find out why, well, go back to the very beginning and read it for yourself, and then listen to us read it and comment on it. And you shall be surprised. But anyways, let's get going. Chapter 6, Kay's Uncle and Lenny. One afternoon, Kay was very busy at the time, getting the post ready. Oh, sorry. That just reads weird. Let me do that again. One afternoon, Kay was very busy at the time, getting the post ready. Kay's Uncle Carl, a small country landowner, came into the room, pushing his way between two of the staff who were bringing in some papers. Kay had long expected his uncle to appear, but the sight of him now shocked Kay, far less than the prospect of it had done a long time before. His uncle was bound to come. Kay had been sure of that for about a month. He already thought of the time he could see how his uncle would arrive, slightly bowed, his battered Panama hat in his left hand, his right hand already stretched out over the desk long before he was close enough, as he rushed carelessly towards Kay, knocking over everything that was in his way. Kay's uncle was always in a hurry, as he suffered from the unfortunate belief that he had a number of things to do while he was in a big city, and had to settle all of them in one day. His visits were only ever for one day, and at the same time, thought he could not forego any conversation or piece of business or pleasure that might arise by chance. Uncle Carl was Kay's former guardian, and so Kay was duty-bound to help him in all of this, as well as to offer him a bed for the night. "I'm haunted by the ghosts from the country," he would say. Now, is that he, that's he referring to Kay, right? That's the only one that makes sense to me.
I don't know, it seems... Yeah,
No.
it should be K.
I thought it was Uncle Carl, but I could...
Yeah, it would make
Well,
sense for
Kay's-
either one, but it, to me it makes more sense for Kay.
He's duty-bound to his uncle, and his uncle's from the country.
Yeah,
So
it
it's
makes
like
more sense for
he's
Kay.
haunted by a ghost from the country.
Oh,
And
okay, yeah, that is K. Yeah.
And it sounds like the kind of arrogant attitude he has
Right.
anyways, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're supposed to love your family members, and, you know, you have obligations towards them, but, you know, you're supposed to do them. But, I mean, he's doing it, like, to be fair to him, but he's comparing it to being haunted by a ghost.
Yeah, K's
Yeah,
not from the country.
Yeah, definitely not. But neither is his uncle. It's explained later. Actually, it's explained very soon after this. But yet again, just on another point in which it's obvious that Kay is not a good person. This is his former guardian. This isn't his biological parent or whatever. But this is, everybody knows that a guardian is somebody who has the same legal rights over you as a parent. Usually because either your parents are incompetent, have given you up for adoption, or they were dead. So this guy raised.
It's not like some distant uncle who means nothing to you, because I could understand that a little bit. Like, I don't know, your distant relative, you have obligations to them. I can understand why you feel like you're being haunted by a ghost.
Yep. So some tension towards family relations here, particularly on Kay's side, because once we see why his uncle's here, this will seem even worse. Another thing to keep in mind is he was expecting his uncle to come. Now, why would he expect that? What reason would his uncle have to visit him? which is related to the many times in which Kay has mentioned that he has expected very strange things without any obvious reason for why someone would ever expect such a thing. So, continuing. As soon as they had greeted each other, Kay had invited him to sit in the armchair, but Uncle Carl had no time for that. He said he wanted to speak briefly with Kay, in private. "It is necessary," he said with a tired gulp. "It is necessary for my peace of mind." Kay immediately sent the junior staff from the room and told them to let no one in. What's this that I've been hearing, Joseph?" cried Kay's uncle when they were alone, as he sat on the table shoving various papers under himself without looking at them to make himself more comfortable. Just takes his fucking work papers, sits on them. Kay said nothing. He knew what was coming, but suddenly relieved from the effort of the work he had been doing, he gave way to a pleasant lassitude and looked at the window at the other side of the street. From where he sat, he could see just a small triangular section of it, part of the empty walls of houses between the two shop windows. "You're staring out the window," called out his uncle, raising his arms. "For God's sake, Joseph, give me an answer. Is it true? Can it really be true?" "Uncle Carl," said Kay, wrenching himself back from his daydreaming. "I really don't know what it is that you want of me." "Joseph," said his uncle in a warning tone. "As far as I know, you've always told the truth. Am I to take what you've just said as a bad sign?" "I think I know what it is you want," said Kay obediently. "I expect you've heard about my trial." "That's right," answered his uncle with a little slow nod. "I've heard about your trial." "Who did you hear it from, then?" asked Kay. "Erna wrote to me," said his uncle. "She doesn't have much contact with you, it's true. You don't pay very much attention to her, I'm afraid to say. But she learned about it nonetheless. I got her letter today, and of course I came straight here. And for no other reason, but it seems to me that this is reason enough. I can read you out the part of the letter that concerns you." He drew the letter out from his wallet. "Here it is." She writes, "I have not seen Joseph for a long time. I was in the bank last week, but Joseph was so busy that they would not let me through. I waited there for nearly an hour, but then I had to go home as I had my piano lesson. I would have liked to have spoken to him. Maybe there will be a chance another time. He sent me a big box of chocolates for my name day. That was very nice and attentive of him. I forgot to tell you about it when I wrote, and I only remember now that you asked me about it. Chocolate, as I am sure you are aware, disappears straight away in this lodging house. Almost as soon as you know somebody has given you chocolate, it is gone. But there's something else I wanted to tell you about Joseph. Like I said, they would not let me through to see him at the bank because he was negotiating with some gentleman just then. After I had been waiting quietly for a long time, I asked one of the staff whether his meeting would last much longer. He said it might well do, as it was probably about the legal proceedings, he said, that were being conducted against him. I asked what sort of legal proceedings it was that were being conducted against the chief clerk, and whether he was not making some mistake. But he said he was not making any mistake. There were legal proceedings underway, and even that they were about something quite serious, but he did not know any more about it. He would have liked to have them have been of some help to the chief clerk himself, as the chief clerk was a gentleman, good and honest, but he did not know what it was he could do, and merely hoped there would be some influential gentleman who would take his side. I'm sure that is what will happen, and that everything will turn out for the best in the end, but in the meantime things do not look at all good, and you can see from the mood of the chief clerk himself. Of course, I did not place too much importance on this conversation, and even did my best to put the bank clerk's mind at rest. He was quite a simple man. I told him he was not to speak to anyone else about this, and I think it is all just a rumor. But I still think it might be good if you, dear father, if you looked into the matter the next time you visit. It would be easy for you to find out more detail, and, if it is really necessary, to do something about it through the great and influential people you know. But if it is not necessary, and that is what seems most likely, then at least your daughter will soon have a chance to embrace you, and I look forward to it." "She's a good child," said Kay's uncle, when he had finished reading, and wiped a few tears from his eyes. Kay nodded. With all the different disruptions he had recently had, he had recently. He had completely forgotten about Erna, even her birthday, and the story of the chocolates had clearly just been invented so that he wouldn't get in trouble with his aunt and uncle. It was very touching, and even the theater tickets, which he would regularly send her from then on, would not be enough to repay her. But he really did not feel now that it was right for him to visit her in her lodgings and hold conversations with a little 18-year-old schoolgirl. "And what do you have to say about that?" asked his uncle, who had forgotten all his rush and excitement as he read the letter, and seemed to be about to read it again. "Yes, uncle," said Kay. "It is true." "True!" called out his uncle. "What is true? How can this be true? What sort of trial is it? Not a criminal trial, I hope?" "It's a criminal trial," answered Kay. "And you sit quietly here while you've got a criminal trial around your neck?" shouted his uncle, getting ever louder. "The more calm I am, the better it will be for the outcome," said Kay in a tired voice. "Don't worry." "How can I help worrying?" shouted his uncle. "Joseph, my dear Joseph, think about yourself, about your family, about our good name. Up till now you've always been our pride. Don't now become our disgrace. I don't like the way you're behaving," he said, looking at Kay, with his head at an angle. That's not how an innocent man behaves when he's accused of something. Not if he's still got any strength in him. Just tell me what it's all about so that I can help you. It's something to do with the bank, I take it?" "No," said Kay as he stood up. "And you're speaking too loud, uncle. I expect one of the staff is listening at the door, and I find that rather unpleasant. It's best if we got somewhere else, then I can answer all your questions as far as I can. And I know very well that I have to account to the family for what I do." "You certainly do," his uncle shouted. "Quite right you do. Now just get a move on, Joseph. Hurry up now." "I still have a few documents I need to prepare," said Kay, and using the intercom he summoned his deputy, who entered a few minutes later. Kay's uncle, still angry and excited, gestured with his hand to show that Kay had summoned him, even though there was no need whatever to do so. Kay stood in front of the desk and explained to the young man, who listened calm and attentive, what would need to be done that day in his absence, speaking in a calm voice and making use of various documents. The presence of Kay's uncle while this was going on was quite disturbing. He did not listen to what was being said, but at first he stood there with eyes wide open and nervously biting his lips. Then he began to walk up and down the room, stopped now and then at the window, or stood in front of the picture, always making various exclamations such as, "That is totally incomprehensible to me," or, "Now just tell me, what are you supposed to make of that?" The young man pretended to notice nothing of this and listened to Kay's instructions through to the end. He made a few notes, bowed to both Kay and his uncle, and then left the room. Kay's uncle had turned his back to him and was looking out the window, bunching up the curtains with his outstretched hands. The door had hardly closed when he called out, "At last! Now that he stopped jumping about, we can go too." Once they were in the front of the hall of the bank, where several members of the staff were standing about, and where just then the deputy director was walking across, there was unfortunately no way of stopping Kay's uncle from continually asking questions about the trial. "Now then, Joseph," he began, lightly acknowledging the bows from those around them as they passed, "tell me everything about this trial. What sort of trial is it?" Kay made a few comments which conveyed little information. He even laughed a little, and it was only when they reached the front steps that he explained to his uncle that he had not wanted to talk openly in front of those people. "Quite right," said his uncle, "but now start talking." With his head to one side and smoking his cigar in short, impatient draughts, he listened.
Drafts.
Oh. Drafts, yeah, okay.
Josh was ready with that one.
Yeah, I did.
We were excited.
Thank you.
It's true. It's a difficult word.
All right, drafts. He listened. "First of all, uncle," said Kay, "it's not a trial like you'd have in a normal courtroom." "So much the worse," said his uncle. "How's that?" asked Kay, looking at him. "What I mean is, that's for the worse," he repeated. They were standing on the front steps of the bank, as the doorkeeper seemed to be listening to what they were saying. Kay drew his uncle down further, where they were absorbed into the bustle of the street. His uncle took Kay's arms and stopped asking questions with such urgency about the trial. They walked on for a while in silence. "But how did this all come about?" he finally asked, stopping abruptly enough to startle the people walking behind, who had to avoid walking into him. Things like this don't come all of a sudden. They start developing a long time beforehand. There must have been warning signs of it. Why didn't you write to me? You know I'd do anything for you. To some extent, I'm still your guardian, and until today, that's something I was proud of. I'll still help you, of course I will. Only now that the trial is already underway, it makes it very difficult. But whatever. The best thing now is for you to take a short holiday staying with us in the country. You've lost weight. I can see that now. The country life will give you strength. That will be good. There's bound to be a lot of hard work ahead of you. But besides that, it will be a way of getting you away from the court to some extent. Here they've got every means of showing the powers at their disposal, and they're automatically bound to use them against you. In the country, they'll either have to delegate authority to different bodies, or just have to try and bother you by letter, telegram, or telephone. And that's bound to weaken the effect. It won't release you from them, but it'll give you room to breathe.
That's very interesting.
To an extent, true. I'll comment on that when this very long passage ends. Well, there's a few things already. Like, this is being pretty long, so a few things to comment on. So it's noted that his uncle only comes to the city on single-day trips, and that he comes for taking care of a shitload of things, because for whatever reason he just wants to do everything in one day. So he puts himself on a tight schedule, but you know, it's like putting a trial on yourself, but you know what you're putting yourself into, you know you can handle it, so you do it. We found out already that he has come only to see Kay, so you know this is not a usual trip at all. You know, it's pretty important. It shows that Kay's pretty important to him. Now, it seems to me that this is not a relationship without care, without like love or anything, but the reasoning the uncle gives expressly is more to do with like the family name and family pride, and like what will they say about all of us thanks to you, kind of deal. Which, given the time period and really given the class of people, this is totally normal. But in itself, unlike other people who know Kay, because it's not clear to me that obviously they have a personal relationship. You know, at some point they must have lived together, but it doesn't seem that they have that much of that personal rapport. Even Kay and his landlady seem to have more of a personal rapport than he does with his uncle. Because his landlady recognized quickly that what the nature of the trial was. But his uncle is just kind of worried about the formalities of the trial.
Yeah. Well, do you speak to your parents or guardians like friends? Not really.
No, not really.
You know,
although I recognize that my family is dysfunctional as fuck.
Yeah.
Other people I've actually lived with sometimes. They spoke to their families, as there's a parental relationship, but they're very personal, very friendly. Not in the way you speak to a friend, but still, very loose. And personal details are easily exchanged, blah blah. This seems like a far more formal relationship, which it doesn't strike me as strange either, given the relationship. He is basically was a foster kid to him, and not that every foster kid is some kind of like impersonal relationship with their guardian or whatever. But it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's also the fact that he likely lived with him only in childhood, and he doesn't really know the man exactly. Okay.
Yeah, and I think I think like just to the way that he was acting, we can kind of tell who Kay sort of takes after. There's similar mannerisms that they've expressed.
Yeah.
the matter of
Kafka, I would
factness.
All K characters are related in some way.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he has the same, starts with a Carl, K. So they share certain mannerisms, and you can kind of see like. Despite how differently they're looking at the trial, there is going to be an affinity of the way they come to think about it. So it's interesting. Next thing about his... so that's his uncle, his cousin, his young cousin, the 18-year-old girl. He's a dick. I mean, this girl just... The fact... It's... Now, I would think... I don't know, like, how... I can't say much about, like, this kind of relationship, or, like, in this kind of, like, higher society kind of thing. I mean, back then, like, people kind of visit each other far more often. Mainly due formalities, I think. Less so than just, like, personal relationships. But... it seems to me that his cousin likes him, to a personal extent. Yeah, no incest implications. Don't misunderstand.
Well, I mean,
she likes it
his
as a
uncle
family.
is from the country, so you never know.
Oh, shut up. But anyway, so sure, she cares about. That's what I want to say. She goes and visits him. Wants to spend some catch-up time. I assume that she would have let the staff know, I'm family, could you let him know? And they would have let him know. And Kay probably just ignored him, ignored her, which is a dick thing to do. Then the thing is, okay, she hears this thing, and she's like, okay, trial, sounds kind of serious. She wants to help him, so obviously he hasn't told anybody. And she's like, well, it's kind of serious. He's probably trying to say something on his own that he shouldn't. Gotta tell, father, because he knows people. He'd probably be able to help if anybody could help. So she lets him know. And she lies on Kay's behalf that, he had remembered her. What's a name day? It's not the birthday. A name day is like when you're... I know at least in like Christian, particularly Catholics, it's when it's kind of like your baptism naming ceremony as well. But Kafka is a Jew, but it's
I
not.
think
It's
it has
not
to do with baptism.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Oh,
yeah. So it's something like that. I'm not exactly sure that's exactly what it is, but it's not said anything clearly that what religion these people adhere to, and it wouldn't be that important anyways.
That would be what it is.
Yeah. So anyway, she lied on his behalf that he gave her chocolates, and Kay's like, "Wow, that's nice. I should. I'll repay her by sending her like theater tickets every so often." And he's like, "And I know that's not gonna repay the favor she's done to me." The fact that he doesn't take this as like a sign of, maybe that he should appreciate this person as a person, because clearly they care about him and are watching out for him, and he kind of treats this more as a transactional thing of like, oh, she did this thing for me, I'll do this thing for her, but I'll never go even to talk. I won't even bother wasting my time talking to her, because he does consider it a waste of his time to go talk to an 18-year-old girl. Like, what could she do for me?
Yeah. Not totally unreasonable, but yeah, kind of dickish.
It is dickish. I mean, if somebody in your family, even if like you don't particularly have any affinity with them, but they look up to you or like they care about you, and like they just want to hang out every once in a while.
Sure.
To me, it's just like in a personal level of like not even familial like relationship, but just like a personable level, like of being a sociable person. Like it's just stupid and I would just say even unethical that not to give this person any time whatsoever. Like nobody's ever that busy. Nobody's ever just like, oh, I only talk to deep people about deep things.
Sure.
Well, one thing I found interesting about the uncle's response was that he felt ashamed of there being a trial at all.
Yes, that is actually something.
Whereas Kay doesn't want there to be a trial. He thinks it's illegitimate, like as he says throughout the book, even though he goes on with it. But he also has an attitude where he wants to keep it to himself. He doesn't want to talk to other people.
Yeah, and he superficially constantly says, "Oh, it doesn't even really matter. It's indifferent to me. The less I care about it, the better. Why should I mind this? It's known in court. Nobody knows about this. Blah blah." The thing about shame of the trial and an indifference to the trial is interesting.
Neither seem to be right.
Yeah, those are clearly perspectives that are missing the point. The other people who are as close to him as he seems to allow people to be, notice the nature of the trial, recognize it has to do with who he is. The landlady notice that it's about his happiness. Notice how other people who are talking about this have mentioned that they have noticed that he is clearly not well, that this is affecting him greatly, and that he is unhappy, and he's expressly unhappy. Everyone notices this except for Kay. And perhaps his uncle. His uncle doesn't mention it either. And he's just worried more about that there's a trial at all. Doesn't care about what's been going on in Kay's life or whatever.
Yeah. Well, part of that I find interesting though is they seem to, like everyone other than his uncle, not want to interfere. They view it as his own trial, like he does. But his uncle seems to be the only character so far who does not think that way, who wants to help him out, get involved. Besides, people who are already part of the trial,
Yeah, insofar as people have gone or hinted at any involvement, it's been in giving him information. It's been in saying I'll put in a word of mouth here or there. But there's been no formality about it. Kay's uncle is the first person who comes in and wants to deal with the trial on a formal level, in a legalistic sense. And he's the first one who forces himself into the process of the trial. Everyone else before this has offered Kay help, and he has accepted it, but not made good use of it. So yeah, going back to the thing about shame, the other people who are aware of the nature of the trial have not implied anything at all that it is shameful to be on trial. They've noted that it's sad. They've been sad for him, but nobody shamed him for being on trial and said, "Oh, it's a terrible thing to be accused, and be innocent or whatever." I don't remember any characters who've actually mentioned that. Everybody says both the people in the court have told him look, you're on trial, you've been indicted. Quit worrying about they told him in the first chapter, quit worrying about the process, quit worrying about the ends, worry about yourself. That's more important now. He didn't get it. He was told by the landlady, this is a problem to do with your happiness, and he's like, well, Cade is in denial that he's unhappy. Yeah, nobody else has ever said, like, oh, you're on trial, that's shameful. And in fact, so far, nobody has talked to him about it. In a way, either they haven't talked to him about it, despite it seems a lot of people know. And the few who have talked to him about it and will talk to him about it, none of them will shame him for it. Like, none of them are like, oh, like what'd you do?
Well, I mean, there have been, like, the people outside at the window, jeering at him. The public knows about it and is judging him silently about it.
Were they jeering at him? I mean, I remember that in the first chapter. But what were they staring at?
They were certainly, like, watching him.
Yeah, they were watching
with some
him.
sort of, like, I don't know. They didn't necessarily want Kay to see them, I guess, is what I took from it.
We can go back to the first chapter and read that little passage, because it's not very long. Let me see where the people are.
I'll keep where we were, by the way.
Let's see, it says, chapter 1, across the street, the people were still there, at the window, and it was only now that Kay had gone up to his window that they seemed to become uneasy and quietly watching what was going on. The old couple wanted to get up, but the man behind them calmed them down. We've got some kind of audience over there, called Kay to the supervisor quite loudly, as he pointed out with his forefinger. Go away! No, oh, excuse me. It's alright. Go away, he then called across them, and the three of them did immediately retreat a few steps. The old pair even found themselves behind the man, who then concealed them with the breath of his body and seemed, going by the movement of his mouth, to be saying something incomprehensible into the distance. They did not disappear entirely, though. They seemed to be waiting for the moment when they could come back to the window without being noticed. Intrusive, thoughtless people, said Kay as he turned back into the window. There's a little bit here prior where they describe these people. Let's see, at the window across the street there was the old pair again, although now their number had increased, as behind them, and far taller than they were, stood a man with an open shirt that showed his chest and a reddish goatee beard, which he squeezed and twisted with his fingers. Okay, that's a second mention of them. Let's see, if nobody believed him in this case, that would be understandable. He could bring Mrs. Grubach in as a witness, or even the old pair from across the street, who probably even now were on their way over to the window opposite. Let's see. Okay, here's the first one. He walked up and down the free space in the room a couple of times. Across the street he could see the old woman who now had pulled an old man, much older than himself, up to the window and had her arms around him. So the crowd was growing steadily. Here's the first mention of it. Okay. Through the open window he noticed the old woman again, who had come close to the window opposite so that she could continue to see everything. She was showing an inquisitiveness that really made it seem like she was going senile. Yeah, again.
Yeah, so I feel like we don't know exactly what they're thinking, so maybe they're not judging. Joseph definitely feels fucking judged, at the very least.
Yeah, he's another one.
And maybe that's more important to think about, like, how Joseph perceives it, more so than particularly what exactly the public is doing.
Yeah, because let's see, here's another one. Kay waited a little while, looked from his pillow at the old woman who lived opposite and who was watching him with an inquisitiveness quite unusual for her, and finally, both hungry and disconcerted, rang the bell. So, an interesting thing is just like these are all older people, and they're just watching. And why are they watching? To me, it's part of the what are they watching is it's a fucking scene. I mean, he's making a scene out of all this.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't they be watching? I mean, not gonna lie, if somebody's making a scene, I'm gonna watch.
It is true. I mean, like, I wasn't ever trying to blame them or anything.
Yeah, so it's not clear that they were judging him so much as they were watching him. He was making a scene. Nothing terrible. And I mean, and if you're going through a trial in your life, and you decide to make a show of it, people are going to watch. Well, what more is there to do? And even if you're not trying to make a show of it, but in fact, if it's just something that just can't help but get out in the public or be public, people are going to watch. But just because they're watching doesn't mean that they're judging anything.
Yeah, well, he definitely wants to hide it and keep it private, for sure. He doesn't want these people watching. He doesn't want to tell anyone he knows. He doesn't want to talk to anyone about it. But people are going to know anyways.
Yep. Now, why did we come to that point? Why were we talking about the crowd?
We were just talking about how just everyone has reacted to this up until this point compared to his uncle.
Yes.
Who was the only one who was like, I'm going to step in and help you, and felt ashamed.
Yeah, nobody has told him or given him any explicit sense that they're shaming him for being on trial, except his uncle at this point.
Yeah, and what more? His kind of related to this whole thing about other people watching. His uncle's like, we need to go into the country, and you need to isolate where the trial can't really follow. They need to send a delegation.
Yeah,
Which
that's
is like a real response to trial of life, of course. You retreat, you meditate or whatever.
Which is what he's being told by the court itself, that it's probably better that he should do that. Because what is it in Chapter 3, the student judge comments about how he thought that it would have been better that they actually arrest Kay, like under house arrest, so that he couldn't go about and fuck his life up even further. So if Kay actually went to the countryside, he'd probably be doing himself a favor. He's been told twice. Actually, no, he's been told multiple times. Definitely more than twice.
Hi, I'm Ida Changan, and this is Reality Check. As we look forward...
He's been told multiple times that he ought to shut up and not say anything. He was told in the first chapter a few times that he's just making it worse by saying anything. He was told in the second chapter that he made it worse by saying anything. He was told in the third chapter he's making it worse by saying anything. Everything he does has made it worse. He would do better just to put himself on pause. And what is it? Oh yeah, in the prior chapter, the last one we read, was it Mrs. Bernster's friend? The message she delivered was basically the same thing. Everything you're doing, the conversation you want to have with Mrs. Bernster is not going to help you, but it's going to make you look worse. So it's better not to have that conversation at all. It's not going to help you. It's not going to do anything. One, it does nothing for the other person, and it's going to make it worse for you. So
yeah, but this conversation with the uncle has brought and we've kind of discussed it, but I guess the two big questions are, first of all, how is his trial, how is he supposed to relate himself to other people when it comes to his trial? And second of all, what is it? How should he feel and respond to his trial? And I think we have like some clear responses that, trying to hide it, like for the first question, is wrong. But it seems like unclear to me, like, because he shouldn't try to hide it, but also he needs to take a step away from everyone else. He shouldn't be involving other people in his trial. Should his family get involved? I'm not sure about that. I would feel like, yes, he should get his family into this. Well, I don't know. I feel like two ways about it. Because it isn't right to drag other people into your trial. It isn't a problem. So, like, I can understand why, like, maybe he wasn't talking to his uncle about it. But he shouldn't be trying to hide it either.
Yeah, I think this is about disentanguling those two things. It's one thing to let people know that you're on trial. It's another thing to get them involved. In this case, Kay trying to not let people know has harmed him. And it's harmed him because he's being stupid with it. He doesn't want people around who are close to him to know. He doesn't want anybody to know. So even strangers who have nothing to do with him or anyone he knows, who don't even know who he is, he can't even bring himself to ask them questions which would directly reveal something important for him if they knew the answer and could help him. He can't even go to the court itself, which already knows who he is and knows exactly what he's on trial for, and ask them about it. Like, he is obstinate. He doesn't want them to know that, oh, he is Joseph K., who's the guy who's on trial. He wants to pretend that, that he could walk around the courts and nobody knows who he is, and that he could sneak in and around things and find out what he needs to know without them ever knowing that it was him who knows. It's ridiculous. So that's certainly been a detriment to him. The thing about involving people in the trial, yeah, definitely. And we're going to see what comes about when you let other people into your trial.
Yeah, I mean, like, you should let other people know about it. You shouldn't drag them in. But also, there is a question of, okay, your fucking nephew's on the trial. You should probably fucking help them. Your friend's in a trial. You should help yourself, help them in the ways you can. Obviously, it is their trial. There is like a question of, okay, you're the uncle, you're Joseph K's friend or whatever. There is like a limit to what extent you can help, but like surely you should, right?
Yeah, and I think there's been no shortage of people who have offered him a lot of help. And it's Kay who has fucked it up.
Yes.
But this is the first time in which somebody is forcing help upon him. Whereas other times people have just offered him and he's taken it. Misused it, but he's taken it. It wasn't forced upon him.
Now, in terms of how he should feel about it and react to it, I mean, obviously we discussed Joseph K's nonchalant, just unseriousness about it isn't good enough. His uncle's feeling of shame about it isn't good enough.
And in the next chapter, after this chapter, his nonchalantness disappears because it's revealed that it was it's a superficial nonchalantness. He doesn't care, but the thing is, what he does care about is the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And he cares too much about the wrong thing.
No, I mean, I think that's already clear so far. Like, the whole conundrum in the beginning about where he was debating, like, I could take this as a joke, but no, I'm just gonna act as if it's true, was clearly a fucking mistake. But then also in chapter 2, when he was waltzing around the court and saying, oh, this is a sham court, this whole trial's nonsense. That was also wrong. That was him caring in the wrong way and too much.
Yep.
And I don't know, the stuff about in the first chapter about him taking as a joke does seem to suggest that the answer does involve a certain kind of nonchalantness about it, a certain kind of taking it easy, but not in the way that he is right now. Because he isn't taking it easy, but he also isn't doing anything about it. And he is doing things about it. I don't know. You get what I mean?
No, yeah. I mean, the story has taken its pains to sort of run and go about this issue without it, even though they've straight up told us as well already. What is it? His landlady, when she tells him about what she knows about the trial, she told him it's the kind of thing she knows. I know it's complex, but it's this kind of thing that I also know that you shouldn't take hard. And she tells him, don't take too hard, and he's like, I'm not taking it hard. And she's like, and it's the kind of thing that you don't need to understand. And Joseph K. is obsessed with trying to understand. And that's a reference to Job. I didn't think about that back then, but actually last time Hyperion and I were reading the prior chapters, he mentioned Job, and that clicked for me right now. Part of Job's trial was that in the end he didn't understand what the fuck it was about. Nonetheless, he bore through it, learned whatever he could from it, whether it was intended or not, for any reasons, and just moved on with his life.
Well, and he did get to understand it, but he had a more proper understanding of his ability to understand it and when he could. He understands that it's retroactive. You can't completely understand it or control it while it's happening.
Well, at least not in the story of Job, though. In the story of Job, at the end, God comes in and says, "Who are you to ask me what the fuck I'm doing? I'm God. I made all these other things. You're a nobody. You're nothing. You do under the conditions that you're given, or whatever it is that is righteous in relationship to me. That's all you need to know. The reasons behind it. They're too great for you to ever understand."
That's the usual reading.
Yeah, that's the usual reading. Well, that's the reading that's explicit in the text. I think that that was a reading that was unfortunately... it's a reading that was appended. Because even within the text itself, in the arguments given to Job, there's quite a few reasons in which it is implicated that Job is like Joseph. Wow, this is a story that's clearly designed with Job in mind.
Joseph is the anti-Job, though, right?
Well,
Joseph
here's the case.
No,
because here's the case. In Job also is told by his friends, maybe you did something wrong. And Job denies that he has ever done anything wrong. He's like, I've done everything according to... And maybe that was true, but the fact that he denied it, but that he didn't even ponder, like, well, maybe there is something that I missed, that I overlooked, blah, 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 is just kind of a weird thing.
Well, I mean, we also are given some of the reasons in the beginning of Job, because if I'm remembering it right, the devil goes to God and he's like, look at Job, he's a good, upright man, he's doing all these good things, and you've rewarded him, but what if you stopped rewarding him? Is he just going to stop doing good?
First of all, that ain't the devil.
Yeah, it's Satan.
Satan, whatever.
It's not Satan.
I forget who it is.
No, it is Satan. I mean, literally, that's just the title.
Well, yeah. But it's not Satan in the sense that he's normally understood. It is that's his job.
Yeah, Satan is the accuser in the court. He's a prosecutor.
It's the accuser.
Yes.
That's the job of this. It's not some evil being.
No, I'm not making that judgment.
I know,
that isn't the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that...
We're still being recorded, so I was just making it clear for the audience.
Yeah, the main point, though, being that it's a test to see whether it's a trial to see whether Job will do good no matter what the consequences are, which should be, how people act. You should do good no matter whether or not you're immediately rewarded by your good deeds.
Yeah, and then that's the core. To me, that's the core message of Job. It's the whole theological stuff just kind of gets wonky because there's just too many interpretative sides to it, which is what the whole discourse with his friends and the discourse with God is. The beginning is like the core thing that you're supposed to do good for good's sake, regardless of the consequences. And that was what the trial was for. And if you keep that in mind, it makes even more sense that the trial is about who one really is.
Yeah. And, well, I think another thing to note is, so first of all, that idea, I think there's a lot of reasons why Kafka would place a lot of emphasis on that. It's, like, clearly a big thing in the Jewish tradition. It's also like a big thing, especially in the Protestant Lutheran world he's living in. What is it? The thing about, faith, not works. That your faith leads you into heaven. Your works don't mean shit. And, like, obviously, the part later in the book, before the law, it makes that clear. We'll talk about that. But I think that's interesting. But, like, another thing is, we keep saying Joseph K. is guilty. I think part of the point is that we're all guilty. That's part of the point of Judeo-Christianity in general, is that we're all sinners. But we can be forgiven.
It's actually
Some of us.
in this chapter. Later, a character will mention exactly this point in a different phrasing, but it is exactly this point. In this court, there is no getting out of it. But I'll wait for that to come up. I think we've got on too much of this tangent, but it's a very good tangent.
A lot of people might not be picking up on this, so.
Oh no, yeah. So like, it's a very good commentary. So let's see. He's told by his uncle to go to the countryside. They'll have to delegate authority. Blah blah blah. You could forbid me to leave, said Kay, who had been drawn slightly into his uncle's way of thinking by what he had been saying. I didn't think you would do it, said his uncle thoughtfully. You won't suffer too much loss of power by moving away. Kay grasped his uncle under the arm to prevent him stopping still and said, I thought you'd think all this is less important than I do, and now you're taking it so hard. Joseph, called his uncle, trying to disentangle himself from him so that he could stop walking, but Kay did not let go. You've completely changed. You used to be so astute. Are you losing it now? Do you want to lose the trial? Do you realize what that would mean? That would mean you would be simply destroyed, and that everyone you know would be pulled down with you, or at the very least humiliated, disgraced right down to the ground. Joseph, pull yourself together. The way you're so indifferent about it, it's driving me mad. Look at you, I can almost believe that old saying, having a trial like that means losing a trial like that. My dear uncle, said Kay, it won't do any good to get excited. It's no good for you to do it, and it's no good for me to do it. The case won't be won by getting excited, and please admit that my practical experience accounts for something. Just as I have always and still do respect your experience, even when it surprises me. You say that the family will also be affected by this trial. I really can't see how, but that's beside the point. I'm quite willing to follow your instructions in all of this. Only, I don't see any advantage in staying in the country, not even for you, as that would indicate flight and a sense of guilt. And besides, although I am more subject to persecution if I stay in the city, I can also press the matter forward better here. You're right, said his uncle in a tone that seemed to indicate that they were finally coming closer to each other. I just made the suggestion because, as I saw it, if you stay in the city, the case will be put in danger by your indifference to it, and I thought it was better if I did the work for you. But will you push things forward yourself with all your strength? If so, that will naturally be far better. We're agreed then, said Kay. And do you have any suggestions for what I should do next? Well, naturally I'll have to think about it, said his uncle. You must bear in mind that I've been living in the country for 20 years now, almost without a break. You lose your ability to deal with matters like this. But I do have some important connections with several people who, I expect, know their way around these things better than I do, and to contact them is a matter of course. Out there in the country, I've been getting out of condition. I'm sure you're already aware of that. It's only at times like this that you notice it yourself. And this affair of yours came largely unexpected, although, oddly enough, I had expected something of the sort after I had read Erna's letter. And today, when I saw your face, I knew it with almost total certainty. But all that is by the by, and the important thing now is we have no time to lose. Even while he was still speaking, Kay's uncle had stood on tiptoe to summon a taxi and now pulled Kay into the car behind himself as he called out and addressed the driver. We're going to see Dr. Huld, the lawyer, he said. We were at school together. I'm sure you know the name, don't you? No? Well, that is odd. He's got a very good reputation as a defense barrister and for working with the poor. That's a weird word. What is a barrister? Is that just a different kind of lawyer? Never heard of that. Barrister, British, a lawyer entitled to practice as an advocate, particularly in the higher courts. Oh, okay. So, all right. He's got a very good reputation as a defense barrister and for working with the poor. Keep that in mind, the poor. Why would his uncle mention this? Joseph Kay isn't monetarily poor. Neither is his uncle. He's poor in something. But I esteem him especially as someone you can trust. It's all right with me, whatever you do, said Kay. Although he was made uneasy by the rushed and urgent way his uncle was dealing with the matter, it was not very encouraging as the accused to be taken to a lawyer for poor people. I didn't know, he said, that you could take on a lawyer in matters like this. Well, of course you can, said his uncle. That goes without saying. Why wouldn't you take on a lawyer? And now, so that I am properly instructed in this matter, tell me what's been happening so far. Kay instantly began telling his uncle about what had been happening, holding nothing back, being completely open with him as was the only way that Kay could protest his uncle's beliefs that the trial was a great disgrace. He mentioned Miss Bernster's name just once and in passing, but that did nothing to diminish his openness about the trial, as Miss Bernster had no connection with it. As he spoke, he looked out the window and saw how, just then, they were getting closer to the suburb where the court offices were. He drew this to his uncle's attention, but he did not find the coincidence especially remarkable. The taxi stopped in front of a dark building. Kay's uncle knocked at the very first door at ground level. While they waited, he smiled, showing his big teeth, and whispered, 8 o'clock, not the usual time to be visiting a lawyer, but hold won't mind it for me. 2 large black eyes appeared in the spy hatch in the door. They stared at the 2 visitors for a while, and disappeared. The door, however, did not open. Kay and his uncle confirmed to each other the fact that they had seen the 2 eyes. "A new maid afraid of strangers," said Kay's uncle, and knocked again. The eyes appeared once more. This time they seemed almost sad, but the open gas flame that burned with the hiss close above their heads gave off a little light that may have merely created an illusion. "Open the door," called Kay's uncle, raising his fist against it. "We are friends of Dr. Huld, the lawyer." "Dr. Huld is ill," whispered someone behind them. In a doorway at the far end of the narrow passage stood a man in his dressing gown, giving them this information in an extremely quiet voice. Kay's uncle, who had already been made very angry by the long wait, turned abruptly round and retorted, "Ill? You say he's ill?" and strode towards the gentleman in a way that seemed almost threatening, as if he were the illness himself. "They've opened the door for you now," said the gentleman, pointing to the door of the lawyer. He pulled his dressing gown together and disappeared. The door had indeed been opened. A young girl, Kay recognized the dark, slightly bulging eyes, stood in the hallway in a long white apron, holding a candle in her hand. "Next time, open up sooner," Kay's uncle, instead of agreeing, said Kay's uncle instead of greeting, while the girl made a slight curtsy. "Come along, Joseph," he then said to Kay, who was slowly moving over towards the girl. "Dr. Huld is unwell," said the girl as Kay's uncle, without stopping, rushed towards one of the doors. Kay continued to look at the girl in amazement as she turned round to block the way into the living room. She had a round face like a puppy's. Not only the pale cheeks and the chin were round, but the temples and the hairline were too. "Joseph!" called his uncle once more, and he asked the girl, "It's trouble with his heart, isn't it? Is it?" "I think it is, sir," said the girl, who by now had found time to go ahead with a candle and open the door into the room. In one corner of the room, where the light of the candle did not reach, a face with a long beard looked up from the bed. "Lenny, who's this coming in?" asked the lawyer, unable to recognize his guest because he was dazzled by the candle. "It's your old friend, Albert." "Oh, it's your old friend, Albert," said Kay's uncle. "Oh, Albert," said the lawyer, falling back onto his pillow as if his visit meant he would not need to keep up appearances. "Is it really as bad as that?" asked Kay's uncle, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I don't believe it is. It's a recurrence of your heart trouble, and it'll pass over like the other times." "Maybe," said the lawyer quietly, "but it's just as much trouble as it's ever been. I can hardly breathe, I can't sleep at all, and I'm getting weaker by the day." "I see," said Kay's uncle, pressing his Panama hat firmly against his knee with his big hand. "That is bad news. But are you getting the right sort of care? And it's so depressing in here, it's so dark. It's a long time since I was last here, but it seemed to me friendlier then. Even your young lady here doesn't seem to have much life in her, unless she's just pretending." The maid was still standing by the door with the candle. As far as could be made out, she was watching Kay more than she was watching his uncle, even while the latter was still speaking about her. Kay leant against a chair that he had pushed near to the girl. "When you're as ill as I am," said the lawyer, "you need to have peace. I don't find it depressing." After a short pause, he added, "And Lenny looks after me well. She's a good girl." But that was not enough to persuade Kay's uncle. He had visibly taken against his friend's care, and, even though he did not contradict the invalid, he persecuted her with his scowl as she went over to the bed, put the candle on the bedside table, and leaning over the bed, made a fuss of him by tidying the pillows. Kay's uncle nearly forgot the need to show any consideration for the man who lay ill in bed. He stood up, walked up and down behind the carer, and Kay would not have been surprised if he had grabbed hold of her skirts behind her and dragged her away from the bed. Kay himself looked on calmly. He was not even disappointed at finding a lawyer unwell. He had been able to do nothing to oppose the enthusiasm his uncle had developed for the matter. He was glad that this enthusiasm had now been distracted without his having to do anything about it. His uncle, probably simply wishing to be offensive to the lawyer's attendant, then said, "Young lady, now please leave us alone for a while. I have some personal matters to discuss with my friend." Dr. Gould's care was still lent over. Dr. Gould's care was still lent far over the invalid's bed and smoothing out the cloth covering the wall next to it. She merely turned her head and then, in striking contrast with the anger that first stopped Kay's uncle from speaking and let out the words out in a gush, she said very quietly, "You can see that Dr. Gould is so ill that he can't discuss any matters at all." It was probably just for the sake of convenience that she would have repeated the words spoken by Kay's uncle, but an onlooker might even have perceived it as mocking him, and he, of course, jumped up as if he had just been stabbed. "You damned!" In the first gurglings of excitement, his words could hardly be understood. Kay was startled, even though he had been expecting something of the sort, and ran to his uncle with the intention, no doubt, of closing his mouth with both his hands. Okay, sorry, just let me go back over that prior sentence about like the anger thing. Just kind of confused me a bit. Let's see. Dr. Gould's care was still lent over the invalid's bed and smoothing out the cloth covering the wall next to it. She merely turned her head and then, in striking contrast with the anger that first stopped Kay's uncle from speaking, and then let the words out in a gush, she said very quietly, "So, I mean, this is probably just a mix of a typo and just like a very awkward translation. Was she the one angry? Because, I mean, that's the only reason I would think that they would be taken aback by this." Hello?
Not sure what I'm reading.
Yeah.
She barely turned her head, and then, in striking contrast with the anger that first stopped Kay's uncle from speaking, and then let the words out in a gush, she said very quietly, yeah, it's probably like a typo, like probably the shouldn't be. So, in striking contrast with anger that first stopped Kay's uncle from speaking, and then let out the words with a gush. It's the anger that was like, that confuses me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, and it would make sense that she would snap at him. You know, he's being, as I said, like, you know, it's clear who Kay takes after here. Very same self-centered attitude as Kay, that his uncle has. So let's continue. "You damned!" In the first gurglings of his excitement, his words could hardly be understood. Kay was startled, even though he had been expecting something of the sort, and ran to his uncle with the intention, no doubt, of closing his mouth with both his hands. Fortunately, though, behind the girl, the invalid raised himself up. Kay's uncle made an ugly face as if swallowing something disgusting, and then, somewhat calmer, said, "We have naturally not lost our senses. Not yet. If what I am asking for were not possible, I would not be asking for it. Now, please, go." The carrier stood up straight by the bed, directly facing Kay's uncle. Thought he noticed that with one hand she was stroking the lawyer's hand. Oh. Kay thought he noticed that with one hand she was stroking the lawyer's hand. "You can say anything in front of Lenny," said the invalid in a tone that was unmistakably imploring. "It's not my business," said Kay's uncle, "and it's not my secrets." And he twisted himself round as if wanting to go into no more negotiations, but giving himself a little more time to think. "Whose business is it, then?" asked the lawyer in an exhausted voice as he leant back again. "My nephew's," said Kay's uncle, "and I brought him along with me," and he introduced him. "Chief Clerk Joseph Kay." "Oh," said the invalid, now with much more life in him, and reached out his hand towards Kay. "Do forgive me. I didn't notice you there at all." Then he said to his carer, "Lenny, go," stretching his hand out to her as if this were a farewell that would have to last for a long time. This time the girl offered no resistance. "So you," he finally said to Kay's uncle, who had also calmed down and sat closer, "you haven't come to visit me because I'm ill, but you've come on business." The lawyer now looked so much stronger that it seemed the idea of being visited because he was ill had somehow made him weak. He remained supporting himself on one elbow, which must have been rather tiring, and continually pulled at a lock of hair in the middle of his beard. "You already look much better," said Kay's uncle, "now that that witch has gone outside." He interrupted himself, whispered, "I bet you she's listening," and sprang over to the door. But behind the door there was no one. Kay's uncle came back, not disappointed, as her not listening seemed to him worse than if she had been, but probably somewhat embittered. Yet again, judging people negatively and making them guilty of something that is just bizarre. "You're mistaken about her," said the lawyer, but did nothing more to defend her. Perhaps that was his way of indicating that she did not need defending. But in a tone that was much more committed, he went on, "As far as your nephew's affairs are concerned, this will be an extremely difficult undertaking, and I'd count myself lucky if my strength lasted out long enough for it. I'm greatly afraid it won't do, but anyway, I don't want to leave anything untried. If I don't last out, you can always get somebody else. To be honest, this matter interests me too much, and I can't bring myself to give up the chance of taking some part in it. If my heart does not totally give out, then at least it will have found a worthy affair to fail in." Kay believed he understood not a word of this entire speech. He looked at his uncle for an explanation, but his uncle sat on the bedside table with a candle in his hand. A medicine bottle had rolled off the table onto the floor. He nodded to everything the lawyer said, agreed to everything, and now and then looked at Kay, urging him to show the same compliance. Maybe Kay's uncle had already told the lawyer about the trial, but that was impossible. Everything that had happened so far spoke against it. So he said, "I don't understand." "Well, maybe I've misunderstood what you've been saying," said the lawyer, just as astonished and embarrassed as Kay. "Perhaps I've been going too fast. What was it you wanted to speak to me about? I thought it was to do with your trial." "Of course it is," said Kay's uncle, who then asked Kay, "So what is it you want?" "Yes, but how is it that you know anything about me in my case?" asked Kay. "Oh, I see," said the lawyer with a smile. "I am a lawyer. I move in court circles. People talk about various different cases, and the more interesting ones stay in your mind, especially when they concern the nephew of a friend. There's nothing very remarkable about that." "What is it you want, then?" asked Kay's uncle once more. "You seem so uneasy about it." "You move in this court circles?" asked Kay. "Yes," said the lawyer. "You're asking questions like a child," said Kay's uncle. "What circles should I move in then, if not with members of my own discipline?" the lawyer added. It sounded so indisputable that Kay gave no answer at all. "But you work in the high court, not that court in the attic," he had wanted to say, but could not bring himself to actually utter it. "You have to realize," the lawyer continued in a tone as if he were explaining something obvious, unnecessary, and incidental, "you have to realize that I also derive great advantage for my clients from mixing with those people, and do so in many different ways. It's not something you can keep talking about all the time. I'm at a bit of a disadvantage now, of course, because of my illness, but I still get visits from some good friends of mine at the court, and I learn one or two things. It might even be that I learn more than many of those who are in the best health and spend all day in court. And I'm receiving a very welcome visit right now, for instance. And he pointed into a dark corner of the room. Where? Asked Kay, almost uncouth in his surprise. He looked round uneasily. The little candle gave off far too little light to reach as far as the wall opposite. And then something did indeed begin to move there in the corner. In the light of the candle held up by Kay's uncle, an elderly gentleman could be seen sitting beside a small table. He had been sitting there for so long without being noticed that he could hardly have been breathing. Now he stood up with a great deal of fuss, clearly unhappy that attention had been drawn to him. It was as if, by flapping his hands about like short wings, he hoped to deflect any introductions and greetings, as if he wanted on no account to disturb the others by his presence, and seemed to be exhorting them to leave him back in the dark and forget about his being there. That, however, was something that could no longer be granted him. You took us by surprise, you see, said the lawyer in explanation, cheerfully indicating to the gentleman that he should come closer, which slowly, hesitatingly, looking all around him, but with a certain dignity, he did. The office director... Oh yes, forgive me, I haven't introduced you. This is my friend Albert Kay. This is his nephew, the chief clerk Joseph Kay. And this is the office director. So the office director was kind enough to pay me a visit. It's only possible to appreciate just how valuable a visit like this is if you've been let into the secret of what a pile of work the office director has heaped over him. Well, he came anyway. We were having a peaceful chat, as far as I was able when I'm so weak, and although we hadn't told Lenny she mustn't let anyone in, as we weren't expecting anyone, we still would rather have remained alone. But then along came you, Albert, thumping your fist on the door. The office director moved over into the corner, pulling his table and a chair with him. But now it turns out that we might have, that is, if that's what you wish, we might have something to discuss with each other, and it would be good if we can all come back together again. Office director, he said, with his head on one side, pointing with a humble smile to an armchair near the bed. I'm afraid I'll only be able to stay a few minutes more, smiled the office director as he spread himself out in the armchair and looked at the clock. Business calls, but I wouldn't want to miss the chance of meeting a friend of my friend. He inclined his head slightly towards Kay's uncle, who seemed very happy with his new acquaintance, but he was not the sort of person to express his feelings of deference, and responded to the office director's words with embarrassed but loud laughter. A horrible sight. Kay was able to quietly watch everything as nobody paid any attention to him. The office director took over as leader of the conversation, as seemed to be his habit once he had been called forward. The lawyer listened attentively with his hand to his ear, his initial weakness having perhaps only had the function of driving away his new visitors. Kay's uncle served as a candle bearer, balancing the candle on his thigh, while the office director frequently glanced nervously at it, and was soon free of his embarrassment, and was quickly enchanted not only by the office director's speaking manner, but also by the gentle, waving hand movements with which he accompanied it. Kay, leaning against the bedpost, was totally ignored by the office director, perhaps deliberately, and served the old man only as audience. And besides, he had hardly any idea what the conversation was about, and his thoughts soon turned to the care assistant and the ill treatment she had suffered from his uncle. Soon after, he began to wonder whether he had not seen the office director somewhere before, perhaps among the people who were at his first hearing. He might have been mistaken, but thought the office director might well have been among the old gentlemen with the thin beards in the first row. So, not much to say about this, other than there's stuff going on in the background. So the office director is an agent of the court. Now, what does the court so far focus itself on? Observation. This guy just would prefer to remain there, and just watch unnoticed, and that he thought this was for the best. Seems in line with what the court does. Another thing to notice here, this is yet another chance for Kay to find out about the court from somebody directly involved in it. Kay's playing it off as if, oh, well, they've excluded me as a conversation, whatever. No, I mean, Kay could join this conversation. It is about him. It's about his affairs. He's not even paying attention to what they're talking about. So, he's like, oh, well, they're just kind of like having me observe. They're just talking to each other. He's not even paying attention to what they're talking about, whether it's related to him, whether it's related to the court. So yet again, Kay is not taking the chance to find out what's going on. This is the second time we have a woman on Kay's... Well, no, this is the third time we have a woman in Kay's mind. First was Bernstner, Miss Bernstner. Then we have the woman who was the wife of the court usher. And now we have Lenny.
The washerwoman.
Yeah. And the fact that Lenny was actually described more than the other women, as far as I remember, as far as like how she looks exactly, is very important, very symbolic. She has a round face, slightly bulging eyes. What's his name?
Sauce. Who has bulging eyes? What are you saying?
Well, yeah, like people like I'm thinking of an actor like who's has kind of those kind of like slightly bulging eyes, but I can't.
Anne Hathaway.
No, Hathaway has big eyes. They're not bulging. Buscemi. I'm thinking of Buscemi.
Yeah, Steve Buscemi.
Says what else does it say? Where is it? The girl. She had a round face like a puppy's. Not only the pale cheeks and the chin were round, but the temples and the hairline were too. So, very odd features. Although I've seen people like this. Round, like circularity, curves, roundness is usually a thing to do with nature. Nature meaning like physical nature, Mother Nature kind of thing. So let's see. Let's continue. There was then a noise that everyone heard from the hallway, as if something of porcelain were being broken. I'll go and see what happened. What's happened? Said Kay, who slowly left the room as if giving the others a chance to stop him. He had hardly stepped into the hallway, finding his bearings in the darkness with his hand still firmly holding the door, when another small hand, and much smaller than Kay's own, placed itself on his hand and gently shut the door. It was the carer who had been waiting there. Nothing has happened, she whispered to him. I just threw a plate against the wall to get you out of there. I was thinking about you as well, replied Kay uneasily. So much the better, said the carer. Come with me. A few steps along, they came to a frosted glass door which the carer opened for him. Come in here, she said. It was clearly the lawyer's office, fitted out with old, heavy furniture, as far as could be seen in the moonlight, which now illuminated just a small rectangular section of the floor by each of the 3 big windows. This way, said the carer, pointing to a dark trunk with a carved wooden backrest. When he sat down, Kay continued to look around the room. It was a large room with a high ceiling. The clients of this lawyer for the poor must have felt quite lost in it. Kay thought he could see the little steps with which the visitors would approach the massive desk, but then he forgot about all this and had eyes only for the care who sat very close beside him, almost pressing him against the armrest. So that's very interesting. A trunk, which is also a seat. Continuing. I did think, she said, you would come out here to me by yourself with me having to come with. Okay, that's just a weird sentence. I think like there's a not missing here. I did not think you would come out here to me by yourself without me having to call you first. It was odd. First you stare at me as soon as you come in, and then you keep me waiting. And you ought to call me Lenny too, she added quickly and suddenly, as if no moment of this conversation should be lost. Gladly, said Kay. But as for its being odd, Lenny, that's easy to explain. Firstly, I had to listen to what the old men were saying and couldn't leave without a good reason. But secondly, I'm not a bold person. If anything, I'm quite shy. And you, Lenny, you didn't really look like you could be won over in one stroke either. That's not it, said Lenny, laying one arm on the armrest and looking at Kay. You didn't like me, and I don't suppose you like me now either. Liking wouldn't be very much, said Kay evasively. Oh, she exclaimed with a smile, thus making use of Kay's comment to gain advantage over him. Just going to point out, he's lying. He's not a shy person at all. He is very bold. Remember the first chapter with Miss Bernster where he pushed himself onto her? Remember the last chapter with her friend where he literally just would break into her apartment and wait there with the door open, the lights off, on her couch? Not a shy, not a timid person at all. See, liking wouldn't be very much, said Kay evasively. Oh, she exclaimed with a smile, thus making use of Kay's comment to gain an advantage over him. So Kay remained silent for a while. By now, he had become used to the darkness in the room and was able to make out various fixtures and fittings. He was especially impressed by a large picture hanging to the right of the door. He leant forward in order to see it better. It depicted a man wearing a judge's robes. He was sitting on a lofty throne, gilded in a way that shone forth from the picture. The odd thing about the picture was that this judge was not sitting there in dignified calm, but had his left arm pressed against the back and armrest. His right arm, however, was completely free, and only grasped the armrest with his hand, as if about to jump up any moment in vigorous outrage and make some decisive comment or even to pass sentence. The accused was probably meant to be imagined at the foot of the steps, atop of which could be seen in the picture, covered with a yellow carpet. That might be my judge, said Kay, pointing to the picture with one finger. I know him, said Lenny, looking up at the picture. He comes here quite often. That picture is from when he was young, but he can never have looked anything like it, as he's tiny, minute almost. But despite that, he had himself made to look bigger in the picture, as he's madly vain, just like everyone around here. But even I'm vain, and that makes me very unhappy that you don't like me. Kay replied to that last comment merely by embracing Lenny and drawing her towards him. She laid her head quietly on his shoulder. To the rest of it, though, he said, What rank is he? He's an examining judge, she said, taking a hold of the hand with which Kay held her and playing with his fingers. Just an examining judge once again, said Kay in disappointment. The senior officials keep themselves hidden, but here he is sitting on a throne. That's all just made up, said Lenny with her face bent over Kay's hand. Really, he's sitting on a kitchen chair with an old horse blanket folded over it. But do you have to be always thinking about your trial? She added slowly. No, not at all, said Kay. I probably even think too little about it. That's not the mistake you're making, said Lenny. You're too unyielding. That's what I've heard. Who said that? Asked Kay. He felt her body against his chest and looked down on her rich, dark, tightly bound hair. I'd be saying too much if I told you that, answered Lenny. Please don't ask for names, but do stop making these mistakes of yours. Stop being so unyielding. There's nothing you can do to defend yourself from this court. You have to confess. So confess to them as soon as you get the chance. It's only then that they give you the chance to get away, not till then. Only without help from outside, even that's impossible. And you needn't worry about getting this help, as I want to help you myself. You understand a lot about this court and what sort of tricks are needed, said Kay, as he lifted her, since she was pressing in much too close to him, onto his lap. That's all right then, she said, and made herself comfortable on his lap by smoothing out her skirt and adjusting her blouse. Then she hung both her arms around his neck, leant back, and took a long look at him. And what if I don't confess? Could you not help me then? Asked Kay to test her out. I'm accumulating women to help me, he thought to himself, almost in amazement. First Miss Birdster, then the court usher's wife, and now this little care assistant who seems to have some incomprehensible need for me. The way she sits on my lap as if it were her proper place. No, answered Lenny, slowly shaking her head. I couldn't help you then. But you don't want my help anyway. It means nothing to you. You're too stubborn and won't be persuaded. Then after a while she asked, Do you have a lover? No, said Kay. Oh, you must have, she said. Well, I have really, said Kay. Just think, I've betrayed her while I'm carrying her photograph with me. Just think, I've even betrayed her while I'm carrying her photograph with me. Yeah, just pausing for a comment. He's been told some things about the court here. First is he sees the picture of the judge, the examining judge. He's told the details that that's not what the judge looks like. It's for when they were young. They never even looked at that. Obviously the painting is what is it? Presenting a facade. It's a false image of what the court is actually like. And Lenny says this is vain.
Talking about a facsimile.
Yeah, Lenny says this is vain. My interpretation is that this is not in fact vain. I think I won't be able to justify that until things come out later. As to why these images are the ways in which the court seems to itself, and it is to itself. And that is how it really is in its own domain. To us, it looks very poor and like, it's a short guy. This court is all nonsense. But the more we see that the court is serious business, the more we realize it's not vain at all. And that these people do not, and it's explained later, particularly in the next chapter, that this superficiality of vainness just doesn't hold. It's not a proper judgment of the court. Now Lenny says they're vain, and she says everybody in the court is vain, including herself, and everybody related to it is vain, including herself. Then she goes on and says, now that aspect doesn't really matter to Kay's trial. It matters to the comprehension of what the court is, but it doesn't matter to what he's undergoing. The one thing she offers that is a genuine help is she tells him exactly what he needs to do. She tells him that he's not going to get away with any defenses, that it's impossible, that the only way to make it through the trial is to confess. And, she brought him out to let him know this. Because it's the first thing she knows. He doesn't ask her about it. She tells him this. Yet again, agents of the court or people related to the court are giving him information without being asked for it. They know he needs it. They give it to him. He completely ignores it. So then, where was it going? Yeah, so she tells him exactly what he needs to do, that only once he confesses can he get out of the court system, will he make it out of the trial. He does not take this seriously, he plays it off. And what comes next? Well, what comes next is the same thing as the second woman, where she tells him she gives him a situation in which he has a chance to help himself. He refuses to do so. He's been given the information he needs. So then he is put on a minor trial. He's given a temptation. And what comes next is exactly this, a temptation. So she's asked that, does he have a lover? He says no. She says, oh, you must have. He says, well, I really do. Just think, I've even betrayed her while I'm carrying her photograph with me. Lenny insisted he show her a photograph of Elsa, and then hunched on his lap, studied the picture closely. The photograph was not one that had been taken while Elsa was posing for it. It showed her just after she had been in a wild dance, such as she liked to do in wine bars. Her skirt was still flung out as she span around, and she had placed her hands on her firm hips, and with her neck held taut, looked to one side with a laugh. You could not see from the picture whom her laugh was intended for. She's very tightly laced, said Lenny, pointing to the place where she thought this could be seen. I don't like her. She's clumsy and crude, but maybe she's gentle and friendly towards you. That's the impression you get from the picture. Big, strong girls like that often don't know how to be anything but gentle and friendly. Would she be capable of sacrificing herself for you, though? No, said Kay. She isn't gentle or friendly, and nor would she be capable of sacrificing herself for me. But I never yet asked any of those things of her. I've never looked at this picture as closely as you. You can't think much of her, then, said Lenny. She can't be your lover after all. Yes, she is, said Kay. I'm not going to take my word back on that. Well, she might be your lover now, then, said Lenny. But you wouldn't miss her much if you lost her, or if you exchanged her for somebody else. Me, for instance. That is certainly conceivable, said Kay with a smile. But she does have one major advantage over you. She knows nothing about my trial, and even if she did, she wouldn't think about it. She wouldn't try to persuade me to be less unyielding. Well, that's no advantage, said Lenny. If she's got no advantage other than that, I can keep on hoping. Has she got any bodily defects? Bodily defects, says Kay. I don't know. It's pretty obvious to me. Why is that not an advantage? If somebody doesn't actually want to spiritually help you, like if they don't care about like how shitty of a person you are, and like at least points that out to you, does that person actually care about you? Like, do they have your best interest in mind? Do they love you? No. The thing about strong women like that can't help but be soft and caring. What is it? Let me just go back to see what it actually said. Big, strong girls like that often don't know how to be anything but gentle and friendly. That's interesting. Where can I find one of those? I think that's more of a. It's less of a. It's not a thing to be said about physicality. It's a spiritual thing. People who are spiritually strong are the kinds of people who understand how to deploy power, and who understand that forcing things on people through sheer strength, sheer violence, psychological or physical, just doesn't work. So they tend to be very kind people. So this would be spiritual strength in the sense of a developed and solid character. Hello?
Yeah.
Voice still working? Okay.
Yeah, you're still.
Alright, so where was I? So anyways, he doesn't care about her. He lies knowingly that he doesn't really know her. He hasn't really gotten to know her very closely, so he's like, oh, no, she's not a caring person or whatever. He just has this picture that he's never been closely studied. So that's how much he cares about her. So, does she have any bodily defects? Bodily defects? Asked Kay. Yeah, said Lenny. As I do have a bodily defect. Just a little one. Look. She spread the middle and ring fingers of her right hand apart from each other. Between those fingers, the flap of the skin connecting them reached up almost as far as the top joint of the little finger. In the darkness, Kay did not see at first what it was she wanted to show him, so she led his hand to it so that he could feel. What a freak of nature, said Kay. And when he had taken a look at the whole hand, he added, what a pretty claw. So, starts out by, oh god, how hideous. And he's like, oh, that's sexy. Reminds me of, people who go like, disgusting. But pretty based, if I do say so myself. Lenny looked down with a kind of pride as Kay repeatedly opened and closed her two fingers in amazement until finally he briefly kissed them and let go. Oh, she immediately exclaimed, you kissed me! Hurriedly and with her mouth open, she clambered up Kay's lap with her knees. She was almost aghast as he looked up at her now that she was so close with him. There was a bitter, irritating smell from her like pepper. She grasped his head, leant out over him, and bit and kissed his neck, even biting into his hair. I've taken her place, she exclaimed from time to time. Just look, now you've taken me instead of her. Just then her knees slipped out, and with a little cry, she fell down onto the carpet. Kay tried to hold her by putting his arms around her and was pulled down with her. Now you're mine, she said. Her last words to him as he left were, here's the key to the door. Come whenever you want. And she planted an undirected kiss on his back. When he stepped out to the front door, there was a light rain falling. He was about to go to the middle of the street to see if he could still glimpse Lenny at the window when Kay's uncle leapt out of a car that Kay, thinking of other things, had not seen waiting outside the building. He took hold of Kay by both arms and shut them against the door as if he wanted to nail him to it. So, just some comments. I don't know what the webbed fingers symbolizes. I have not looked much into it. The only thing that comes immediately to mind is, webs catch water. It's kind of like a net. So, you can scoop with webs. So she's kind of scooped him right up, grabbed on, and he also describes her hand as a claw. Here I think she's playing the role similar to Satan, but not quite Satan. She's not an accuser, but she is a tempter. So she's not the one. She's she's not the one who has accused him before God, but she's the one now who's grabbing him and pulling him deeper into the trial and intensifying it. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Because at first she comes in, she offers him actual help. He doesn't want it. He wants to be tempted. So, okay, fine. He's getting a temptation, and now he's getting dragged in. I mean, the fact that he has this random allure for this deformity. Now, that's pretty easily symbolic. He's particularly, like, the thing that gets him most than anything is her deformity, her defects. You know, he's a defectuous person. Her defect is what attracts him. You know, it's kind of like how the kind of people who are attracted to sexual deviancy, let's say, to not use a more politically incorrect word, tend to be fucked up people themselves. Why would that be? What connection could there be? So, you know, part of why she is so alluring to him is precisely because she is the trap specifically designed for him. A trap that has like a million gigantic signs, you know, with red flashing lights, but he's definitely not paying attention. So, anyways, at least here she's presented as an entity that is negative, although not entirely negative. But you know, because she actually did offer him like genuine information and advice that was going to help him, and he's ignored it. You know, she just kind of takes on this ulterior role. It's a case which, like, I think, just like the second woman, the washerwoman, because he has refused help from all these other people, people are placed in his way who will attract him precisely because they are the kind of temptations that he likes, that he's attracted to. And the first thing they do is they offer him help. He ignores it, and they're like, "Okay, fine. You don't want the help. We're gonna drag you in deeper." And it's. I don't think this is like something that's esoteric in the text at all. It's pretty obvious to me. Certainly obvious from the first time I listened to it. So, anyways, okay. So he's left. Another thing, you know, her smell, bitter pepper. It's kind of like, you know, the usual things like that people describe about demons and devil. You know, the devil appears and it's bitter, acrid, and sulfurous. But the bitter and pepper is kind of related to that, but not exactly. I'm pretty sure this is probably symbolic of something. I'm not exactly sure what. So probably something alchemical. Now we're going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, like, I might want to look at the translation, or the original, to see exactly what it was. But it probably is just something like, just bitter. But who was it that, like you mentioned, it could be alchemical? What's the name of that guy, Bema, right? He had all those things about the tastes, right? The bitter, sweet.
Yeah. Although Bema uses them in his own way. So if we were trying to find some alchemical meaning, we'd have to go to the major alchemical thinkers like Paracelsus or whatnot. And I'm pretty sure there certainly has to be something related to this. Anyway, so she's got him wrapped around her finger at this point. Whatever it is that she does, she's accomplished it, and she'll keep accomplishing it. So let's see. He gets out. His uncle's there. His uncle left out of the car. While Kay was thinking of other things, had not seen waiting outside the building, he took hold of Kay by both arms and shoved him against the door as if he had wanted to nail him to it. "Young man," he shouted, "how could you do a thing like that? Things were going well with this business of yours. Now you've caused it terrible damage." You slope off with some dirty little thing more... sorry, let me reread that. That's just so weird that you slope off. Is that even... Usually people say you slink off, but okay. You slope off with some dirty little thing who, moreover, is obviously the lawyer's beloved, and stay away for hours. You don't even try to find an excuse. Don't try to hide anything. No, you're quite open about it. You run off over there and stay there. And meanwhile, we're sitting there, your uncle who's going to such effort for you, the lawyer who needs to be won over to your side, and above all the office director, a very important gentleman who is in direct command of your affair in its present stage. We wanted to discuss how best to help you. I had to handle the lawyer very carefully. He had to handle the officer director carefully. And you had most reason of all to at least give me some support. Instead of which you stay away eventually. We couldn't keep up the pretense any longer. But these are polite and highly capable men. They didn't say anything about it so as to spare my feelings. But in the end, not even they could continue to force themselves. And as they couldn't speak about the matter in hand, they became silent. We sat there for several minutes, listening to see whether you wouldn't finally come back. All in vain. In the end, the office director stood up, as he had stayed far longer than he had originally intended, made his farewell, looked at me in sympathy without being able to help. He waited at the door for a long time, although it's more than I can understand why he was being so good, and then he went. I, of course, was glad he'd gone. I'd been holding my breath all this time. All this had even more effect on the lawyer lying there ill. When I took my leave of him, the good man, he was quite unable to speak. You have probably contributed to his total collapse and so brought the very man who you are dependent on closer to his death. And me, your own uncle, you leave me here in the rain. Just feel this, I'm wet right through, waiting here for hours, sick with worry. Alright, and that's the end of that chapter. Can't say there's anything to comment about that, pretty straightforward.
I looked it up. It's archaic, kind of a slope off to leave a place quietly or secretly.
Yeah, I looked that up too.
I've never heard that either.
Alright, a good chapter. That was a good 2 hours almost. I enjoyed it. Love this book. So for those of you listening, hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully the audio quality was good. See you next time.
Later.